Hello and welcome back to the Lowdown, everybody, where today we are talking about the players that have proven you wrong so far this season. Coming up, who is the Man United star that has been central to the revival under Ruben Amorim?
He really has had a point to prove under Ruben Amorim, especially the fact that left 10 role is kind of suited to him with the wing-back overlapping.
The much maligned midfielder that should be a surefire pick for Tuchel's World Cup squad.
I think he is now a nailed-on name to go to the World Cup.
And the Chelsea player that's looking world-class once again. But Reece James is also deciding games almost by himself now. Hello and welcome back to the Lowdown, everybody. And it is a lineup of very happy fans. Man United and Sunderland. Flying, guys. We're back.
Title race, I'm hearing.
Yes, absolutely. Let's not stop at the top four. Let's go for the title. Come on.
Could you do it, Dukes?
We could do the title. No, we could do top 10 maybe. I'm not ruling that out, but I think we will drop off quite considerably. We will see. It's still very, very tight, but what a win against Chelsea. We maybe will. Huge. I always manage to crowbar in a few Sunderland players. I'm sure we'll touch on them through the course of this episode. But today, guys, we'll talk about the players proving you wrong this season. And I think it's been an interesting start to the season on that front. Mikey, why don't you kick off with a player that represents your club, who I think has surprised a lot?
Yeah, I think it's probably timely to say something positive about Man United on this show. Haven't been able to do that in quite a while. And I guess you could pick out 2 or 3 players from this Man United team, but I guess the majority of the big performers in this side have been in the attack, and they've been the new signings who have arrived for big money. And so they're not necessarily proving anyone wrong. They, had a lot of money slapped on them. That's a lot of confidence from the club. Doubts from outside because United have spent big money on lots of attackers in recent years, and a lot of them have failed to live up to it. So there was pressure on those players, but I think Mason Mount has really stood out to me this season as someone who has been at United for a few years, arrived for big money, did not impress in his first couple of years, mainly because of injury. I think he missed over 50 games through injury for Man United, and he's only made 18 Premier League starts since arriving at the club. That's including this season. So he really has had a point to prove under Ruben Amorim, especially the fact that that left 10 role is kind of suited to him with the wing-back overlapping. Thrived in that kind of system under Thomas Tuchel at Chelsea. And I think back end of last season and then into this season as well, he's really, really impressed. Last year, impressed a lot, in particular in the Europa League, coming off the bench in the quarterfinals and semi-finals. And then this season, of course, up against Matthjis De Ligt and Benjamin Sesko for a starting spot. And yes, he was dropped against Brighton, didn't even come off the bench, but he was trusted by Ruben Amorim in that kind of false 9 role against Arsenal and Liverpool. I think both of those games, actually, United performed similarly in. It was just that against Arsenal, they went a goal down and then just, were chasing the game for the rest of the match. And in Liverpool, they got, the early goal, which was all important in that win. And I thought Mount was excellent in both those games.
Big goal against Sunderland as well. I know
really big goal against Sunderland.
But you guys were under serious pressure in that game. And it was a massive win.
Yeah, massively. And on the ball, he's been brilliant. He's actually taking, I think, less touches than he's ever done per game in his career. But I think that has more to do with the fact that United are playing a lot more direct this season. The Premier League in general is a lot more direct in terms of the way that games are going. So yeah, I've been super, super impressed by him. His pressing numbers are actually down, but then he's tracking back a lot more than the other attackers. He's making a lot of tackles in the defensive third as well. So yeah, all round, I think he's been great.
I've got 2 questions for you, actually. The first one, do you think there will be games this season where Amorim does still turn to a Mount, Cunha and Mbeumo front 3? And secondly, you mentioned some other Man United players that might have impressed you in terms of going under the radar. Who are those?
Yeah, I think he will. I think he will continue to rely on Mount. I think particularly in big games, I forget actually, he was more playing in that left 10 role. It was Cunha who was playing more as a 9 against Liverpool. I do forget that. Yeah, I mean, Joe, what do you reckon? Is there anyone else who you think has impressed you more or has proven a point more in this United team?
I don't necessarily think proven a point, because Mason Mount at the start of the season was being entirely written off. People were saying sell him, weren't they? But I do think we should talk about Matthjis De Ligt a little bit, who I think has been one of the outstanding central defenders in the league, and there were certain narratives developing around him that, he's been sold by 2 big clubs, he's never going to cut it at a major club, he's not got the level to perform week in, week out in the Premier League. I think he's been comfortably United's best centre-back. He's one of the first names on the team sheet now. You see him as a complete leader of the back line. He's operated in 2 different central defensive positions on the right side of centre-back role against Liverpool, where I thought he was excellent, but also as a central centre-back with Lenny Yoro outside him and Luke Shaw outside on the other side. So I think all round his game has just been the best I've seen in a United shirt this season. You know, he's winning more defensive duels than any other centre-back in the Premier League right now, and it's honestly a travesty he's not involved in this Netherlands setup. The fact he's not being selected is, it's a criminal offence. So
they've got a lot of depth there, to be fair.
But as part of a 6-man central defensive unit, we're not taking Matthjis De Ligt.
I don't know, there's Timber and Van Dijk and Botman and Van der Ven. They've got options.
He's got to go. He has got to go. I think he's having a better campaign at the start of this season than certain names across Europe, and he's not even in consideration. I think largely that comes down to the fact that him and Koeman haven't always seen eye to eye, have they? Hasn't been selected for a few different reasons, but I think he has to be back in the Dutch setup for the World Cup if he continues to play as he is.
Fair enough. I mean, just quickly before we finish on Man United, what's the dream 3 at the back now for Man United, for you, Mikey?
It kind of depends game to game, doesn't it? Because Maguire has impressed in recent weeks. I mean, ideally for me, it's still De Ligt, Yoro, and then probably Mazraoui as the right, or Yoro on the right.
Come back to me on that. I think Lisandro Martinez, when he's back fit, it is for sure going to be coming back into the pitch. I think it'll be Martinez, De Ligt, Yoro for me.
Okay.
It depends what kind of Martinez we get back from injury. But I do think on the leadership thing, especially at the start of this season, I do think Matthjis De Ligt, if Bruno does leave Man United next summer, I feel like he would be my pick to be United captain.
Oh, let's see what happens there. All right, Joe, who is your first player that's proving us wrong?
I think I'm going to go for Joao Palhinha.
Nice.
And I think he's proven a lot of people wrong, especially over in Germany. And I think he was widely sort of derided, wasn't he? 6 Bundesliga starts last season under Vincent Kompany after that €50 million move. I think it's fair to say it didn't work, mainly because Bayern want to play in a very, very different style to the way he was utilised at Fulham and is now being utilised at Spurs. He's not going to get on the ball. He's not going to get into that defensive midfield position over Pavlovic or Kimmich. So you can kind of understand that from Vincent Kompany's perspective. He's going down a very different route to Joao Palhinha. But that's not to write Joao Palhinha off. You know, in the final 2 seasons we saw him at Fulham, he was remarkable, wasn't he? You know, I think 148 tackles in his first season in the Premier League, nearly 50 more than anybody else. Second season was 30 more than anybody else. He's a tackling machine. He played pretty much every minute of those Fulham seasons as well. 35 starts, 31 starts. Goes to the Bundesliga, it's a collapse. You think, is his body going to come back as well? Is he still going to be able to do it at that sort of tackling machine rate that we've never seen before? Well, he is. You know, immediately back in the Premier League, immediately the top tackler, already 15 more tackles than anybody else in the Premier League. It's a ridiculous number of tackles per game at the moment. You know, over 5 per 90, which would see him put up 192 tackles across the course of the season, which would be record-setting effectively in the Premier League if he continued at this rate. And I think that is an excellent job for Spurs. Screening that back line, he's winning loads of balls. He scored 2 really important goals as well against Manchester City and the equaliser against Wolves. I think he's been one of their players of the season, Spurs. And I don't think I would necessarily have said that when I saw the loan move. I thought, it's a bit...
Yeah, were you worried about the move? I thought for a Thomas Frank setup, Palhinha seemed like a pretty safe bet.
The reason I was maybe a little bit sceptical about it is it didn't feel the most Tottenham of moves. You know, the summer before the Tottenham transfer business, we looked at and thought, okay, they're clearly moving towards signing younger players with huge potential for fairly significant fees, but also, you know, players like Archie Gray, Matthijs Tel coming in, even this summer, Xavi Simons, to sign a 30-year-old loanee that's kind of failed in the Bundesliga for a season. I think a lot of people were like, this is not the most inspiring move, is it? But I think it's proved to be the most inspiring move. I think he's been their best midfielder. The issue Thomas Frank has got is who he partners with him.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot of talk, there is a lot of narrative developing amongst Tottenham fans, actually, I think, about the Palhinha-Bentancur double pivot. Is it dynamic enough? Does it move the ball between the lines quickly enough to bring Xavi Simons into play? I think a lot of people want to see Bergvall Palhinha. But what Thomas Frank is clearly doing is trying to set a foundation here. You know, they've scored, I think, the joint most goals in the league. They've got the joint second best defensive record in the league. And yes, it's not flashy. And even the performance away at Everton on the weekend, for large proportions of that game, Everton were the better team, playing the better football. But it's much more stable. I think it's easy to forget this is a team last season that finished 17th, lost 22 games and conceded like nearly a record amount of Premier League goals.
Yeah.
So I kind of understand the Frank idea of that double pivot, but I think across the course of the season, he will have to become a little bit more dynamic. He's going to have to play Bergvall, or he's going to have to bring Matthjis De Ligt back into the team.
I think Frank's still getting to grips with this squad as well. I think it's easy to forget that this is Frank's first. Well, first of all, it's the biggest job he's had. But second of all, it's the first job that he's had in club football where he's, looking at a squad and he's just had a pre-season with them. Like at Brentford, he'd had years with that squad before he actually took them over as the head coach. So, talent level, the competition for places, just the time that he's had with them. I feel like it's very understandable that he's playing it safe for now.
I think the interesting point, though,
maybe unleash them later in the season
with Palhinha is that you wouldn't have had him down as the first midfield name on that team sheet for Spurs. I don't think at the start of the season.
I don't know.
Coming off the back of last season, I thought Bergvall was absolutely remarkable. They've brought Xavi Simons into the club. Benton Kerr's come back to fitness. At the start of the campaign, Pat Matthjis De Ligt, specifically playing that 10 role, was playing out of his skin.
But none of those are pure destroyers, though. Like Palhinha is such a bedrock of a midfield in the way that the others aren't.
Yeah, I agree. But he's been the best player for Spurs flat out. He's been their best player of the season so far.
Probably along with
30-year-old loanee. I think that sums it up for me. I don't think people were talking about him to that level. And there was definitely narratives developing about Palhinha coming into this season that, maybe he was a bit of a two-hit wonder. Maybe he can't convert that to a big club. It failed at Bayern Munich. Can he do it again in the Premier League at this age? And I think he's dispelled a lot of those rumours.
Yeah, I think he's done really well. The player I want to suggest first isn't so much someone that's proven people wrong in the same sense as some of these other players, because I don't think anyone ever doubted this guy's quality, but he has managed to sort of get rid of those fitness issues that plagued him for so long, and that's Reece James. Across the 4 previous seasons to this one, he'd missed 118 games, 57 of those with hamstring injuries. And it did feel like, is this a guy that's never really going to fulfill his true potential with those consistent injury issues? But he's now featured in 24 of their last 27 league games. He started and played the full 90 of their last 5 league games. And we're now seeing Reece James really turn up and be the player that everyone thought he was going to become necessarily under that Thomas Tuchel sort of period in 2021. And look, he had a phenomenal patch back then. He's probably the best, most well-rounded England right back that we have. And it's so exciting with Trent Alexander-Arnold having injury issues at Real Madrid, with him having a fight on his hands to even become starting number 1 there, with Fede Valverde capable of playing there, with Dani Carvajal there as well, although Carvajal does now need surgery on a knee issue, which could pave the way for Trent Alexander-Arnold when he comes back. But Reece James is also deciding games almost by himself now. And you look at some of the players in that Chelsea starting 11. I know there's no Cole Palmer, but some of them really need to step up to the level of a Cucurella and a Moses Caicedo and an Enzo Fernandez. And I just feel like they're being held back by the likes of Tosin, Chalobah, players like this, Pedro Neto, experienced Premier League players now who should be able to get Chelsea closer to title contention at the start of this season. But one thing that can't be accused of Reece James is holding back this side at the moment. He's at 0.2 expected assists per 90. Daniel Munoz is the only fullback in the Premier League that's averaging more. Only Neto and Joao Pedro have created more chances for Chelsea so far this season. And when Reece James is at his best, he can dominate an entire flank, not necessarily with overlapping runs and getting to the byline, but just with his technical ability on the ball and his ability to read situations as well. He's such an all-round threat. And in a World Cup year, it's brilliant to see. So Reece James, big shout out. Mikey, who is your second one?
Gabriel Martinelli, I want to give a shout out to. Now, compared to the other players we've spoken about so far, Martinelli's not starting every game. In fact, he's starting very few games. But I think probably out of everyone that we've spoken about so far, he was getting panned the most last season, even the season before. And I think unfairly, let's be honest, like last season, he put up 8 goals and 4 assists in the Premier League, which for an underperforming Arsenal side, I think is actually quite good. The season before was when he had his real drop-off. He got 6 goals and 4 assists. The season before, he'd had 15 goals and 5 assists. So this is still a player who, has struggled to get back to that level that we saw of him in that first real Arsenal title challenge season when he had Granit Xhaka, just backing him up and feeding him balls, and he's really missed him since then. I think this summer, when we were talking about the Martin Dubravka signing, I was really hopeful that would unlock Martinelli again, and it hasn't really happened in the way that I would have thought. Trossard is very much first choice over him on the left. We've seen Eze and Madueke start on the left under Arteta as well this season. Arteta's solution to the kind of Martinelli problem, as it were, has just been to use him as an impact sub in the Premier League, and it's worked so well so far. He started all 3 Champions League games and scored in all of those as well. And it's just great to see him picking up more central positions again. You think about the equaliser against Man City, which I think has been a pivotal moment in the early stages of this season. They were coming off that Liverpool loss, then beat Forest, but if they'd lost to City at home as well as losing to Liverpool away, I think psychologically that could have been quite damaging for this Arsenal team, and certainly would have brought up the kind of very tired narratives over Arsenal and their title credentials, on social media and among pundits.
I think that was a big goal against Athletic Club in the first Champions League game.
Yeah, and that was only
struggling in that game.
And that was only 3 days before, I think. So to score that and then set up Trossard off the bench as well in that game was massive. And both the Athletic Club goal and the Man City goal were just world-class goals. They were so good, and were very reminiscent of Martinelli, not only in that 22-23 season, but when he burst onto the scene as a 19-year-old at Arsenal. That ability to just break through past the last man centrally. I've been super impressed by him. It'll be interesting to see where he goes from here.
Does Madueke start when he's back on the left?
I'm not so sure. I don't know if we've seen enough of Madueke on the left for Arsenal to make that judgment, but certainly I would prefer Madueke on the left over Trossard, and at the moment in the Premier League it doesn't look like Martinelli's getting that. So actually, to answer your question,
choice, do you know what I mean?
I don't know if he becomes a third choice though, because I think Trossard as a bench option, I prefer in central areas, I think, whereas Martinelli, I think, when you've got a tired defence, when you've had Madueke running a right-back ragged throughout the game, I think I'd rather have Martinelli come on and beat him for speed. So I don't think Martinelli's role necessarily changes in this team. And I guess it's just another example of how this Arsenal squad is so stacked. Arteta can split minutes between players between the league and Champions League. I expect, once Ødegaard's back as well, that we'll see Eze pick up more minutes on the left too. They've got so many different options and so many different profiles on that left-hand side. In terms of his underlying stats, actually, some have dropped off this season. Last year, actually, I think he was performing better than a lot of people gave him credit for. But I think now that this Arsenal attack is more three-dimensional and you've got threats coming from all sorts of different areas, late in games now, Martinelli is able to pick up space. Whereas last season, when he was the number one left-wing option, he was having to play full 90s where teams were betting against Arsenal, and he was having to he was having to pick up the ball deep and take 2-3 players on, which he's fine at, but by the time he was getting into the box, he wasn't really in good goal-scoring positions, or he was flapping at shots. Now, he seems to have a lot more freedom.
It does feel like that second choice 11 from Arsenal right now. The gap between their first and second 11 is tighter than any other team in the league by quite some distance, and maybe that second choice Arsenal 11 would kind of be in Champions League contention this season with the way that the top teams have started as well, and Martinelli seems to have been reinvigorated by the amount of competition at Arsenal now. Joe, who is your second one?
My second one's a tap-in, I think, and we have to talk about Jordan Henderson, who has definitely proved people wrong this season. I think this is the definition of this sort of question. The answer should be Jordan Henderson. When he arrived in the league, I actually think he was mocked a little bit by certain quarters of the fan base.
Doogie didn't want him at Sunderland for one.
I didn't. Proven right.
I mean, they did get Granit Xhaka. Come on. Granit Xhaka is having an outstanding season.
I'd have had Henderson and Xhaka in that team, though.
But, this is a player who was signed
everywhere
for free from Ajax, and still there were question marks about his signing, weren't there? There were still people saying, oh my goodness, way over the hill. Still, people are questioning whether or not he should go as part of that England squad to the World Cup, and maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the impact he's had on Brentford can't be denied. I think to lose Christian Norgard, a player so vital, consistent starter of games, captain, leader, and definitely sort of the fulcrum of that midfield in the summer to Arsenal was massive, and it was going to be a void to fill, especially when you lose your manager, you lose your two best forwards. But the Norgard miss and sale, I think, is underplayed a little bit because everybody focuses on Visser and Burmo and Thomas Frank, don't they? But having a lead like that in the dressing room that pulls everybody together, I think, is vital. Jordan Henderson has done that. His time at Ajax wasn't necessarily as bad. I don't think it was as bad as people make out. Clearly, he joined
Ajax in a bad moment,
exactly,
didn't he?
And he clearly made a mistake when he went to Saudi, and he's admitted that, hasn't he? And I think first 6 months at Ajax were a bit of a problem, but second season, he became extremely reliable. He became club captain. He started 21 games. Ajax were top of the Eredivisie for the majority of this. It should have won the Eredivisie last season. Ajax, they threw that away, really, and opened the door for PSV. Total crumble. And I'm sure he'll be very disappointed he didn't leave Ajax with an Eredivisie to his name. But what he's brought to Brentford, not even just his off-the-field experience and leadership, but some of his actual play. His all-round footballing style right now suits the way the league has gone this season perfectly, I think. He's an excellent direct passer, really good range to his passes. He gets around the field really effectively for a player of his age. He's very combative. I don't think we're seeing as many teams this season play in that sort of high possession-based, loads of midfielders getting loads of touches on the ball, and that's kind of suiting Jordan Henderson. He's able to win a lot of second balls. He's able to play very direct. He's able to push people up the pitch and influence in both boxes. I think he's been an amazing signing for Brentford for free, given the position they are currently in, 11th in the league, through to the Carabao Cup again after a crushing victory against Grimsby last night. Overall, that signing literally couldn't have gone any better. He's been one of the signings of the season so far, and I think he deserves an England spot. I think coming into this season, I was saying Jordan Henderson can't be part of this England group. We've got to move on from Jordan Henderson. We've got Wharton there, we've got Anderson there, we've got other young options coming through, based not only on his leadership and what he brings off the field, but also on his performances. I think Henderson goes as part of that 26-man England squad. I think you have Wharton, Anderson, Henderson and Rice as your 4 deeper midfield options. Perfect. One of those players, probably Henderson, isn't going to get loads of minutes at the tournament, but offers a huge deal off the field. Tuchel's spoken about in recent sort of press conferences, him being effectively another coach on the field, another coach in the dressing room. You can see that for Brentford. I think you see it for England as well. Having Henderson alongside Anderson and Wharton adds so much experience, it adds so much leadership to the group, that I think he is now a nailed-on name to go to the World Cup. I'd be really surprised. If he didn't go, I'd be shocked. I'd be really shocked.
Yeah, you're not the first person that I've heard
Who misses out, though? I guess, Kobbie Mainoo's not getting any minutes at United.
There's not that much
depth.
There's
loads of depth in the deep flying area. Yeah. There isn't loads of depth. If there was obvious standout names there that were flying peak age or sort of 21, 22 that you thought are going to explode, then they would be in there. But I would take Wharton, I would take Anderson, and I would take Henderson.
I guess Curtis Jones is the big one, isn't it, at Liverpool?
Right now, I know that Curtis Jones is outstanding for Liverpool, and he's certainly over the last 2 or 3 weeks really come to the fore, especially with Gravenberch's injury. I thought he was amazing away at Frankfurt, for instance, and he's formed a nice little partnership with Szoboszlai. But I would, if I was picking the World Cup squad tomorrow, I would probably take Henderson based on his leadership and based on the fact that Anderson and Wharton right now, for me, are just a stage ahead of where Curtis Jones is.
I don't think that's a particularly controversial take to have Henderson over Jones on the basis of what we've seen so far. I was going to talk about some Brentford players as well, but why don't I come back to them, because I think there are a number of players we can talk about from Keith Andrews' squad, and instead go to Sunderland and talk about Dan Ballard, who had a really interesting season last year. He was actually kind of second choice on the bench for much of the campaign. Chris Mepham and Luke O'Nien were Sunderland's starters. He only played 30 minutes of Sunderland's last 11 regular league games of the season. Then there's an injury, and he's thrown in for the semi-final, against Coventry. Scores that amazing goal. Well, I say it wasn't an amazing goal, it was an amazing moment, but scores a great goal, gets us into the playoff final. Early on in that game, Luke O'Nien does his shoulder, Chris Mepham comes on, Dan Ballard plays the full 90 in that final. And at the start of this season, you're thinking, he's probably going to be third or fourth choice. We'd signed Alderete, we'd signed Mukiele, we'd signed Geertruida as well, quite late on from RB Leipzig. And you thought Dan Ballard probably going to be pushed to one side, which has happened to Luke O'Nien, quite sadly, given his impact taking us up from League One. But Ballard, from the very first game, where Mukiele and Alderete were on the bench, they'd only just been signed, but he scores a massive goal against West Ham, playing alongside Sealt, who was a really inexperienced centre-back that hadn't played much for us in the Championship. He makes a huge block from Jared Bowen in that game too, and Sunderland get off to this amazing start, and it's only West Ham, who have been terrible so far this season, but it really did form a lot of momentum for this season so far. And he's only started, I think, 4 league games. I think he's played less than half the available minutes, but only Isidor has had more shots than him so far this season. His XG per 90, so his threat from corners and free kicks, is at 0.13, which is the same as Cairo Matoma this season and the same as Jared Bowen. So he's a threat from set pieces, and his expected assists, again, threat from set pieces, is the same as Dominic Szoboszlai this year. And his aerial duel win rate is right up there. His aerial duel win percentage is right up there. His tackle success rate. He just looks like a very very perfect sort of centre-back for a newly promoted side in this season, which is being dominated by physicality and set pieces. And there's no shame in that. The other player I want to mention from a Sunderland perspective is Wilson Isidor, who started the season on the bench for Mayenda. Mayenda scored in that opening game, so did Isidor against West Ham. And he has been just so clinical. And this is partly what worries me about Sunderland going forward, is that he's taken, I think, 10 more shots than any other Sunderland player, but he scored 4 goals from 6 shots on target. That is unlikely to continue as the season progresses.
I think Leeds have got more higher XG than Sunderland.
What's that, sorry?
I think Leeds have higher XG than Sunderland so far this
season.
Well,
right down
so
there.
You're riding the wave.
We're riding the wave, man, but what a wave. What a wave. I've got my board out. I'm just loving it. But he's taken the long route around to get here as well. He came through the Rennes Academy, goes to Monaco, mainly features for their second team, ends up being used in the French third tier, then has to go to Russia with Lokomotiv and then Zenit. And then last season, there was patches where he was phenomenal. But even towards the back end of the season, Mayenda was more the main man. And Isidor, for all the strengthening we did in the summer, we didn't really sign too many experienced strikers, which did feel like maybe we were a little bit short up there. Brian Brobby, I do expect to feature a little bit more as the season progresses, and amazing assist at the weekend against Chelsea. But we needed someone to take advantage of the very few chances we are creating right now, and Isidor has done that and got us up to 4th as it stands. And that table has been screenshotted a lot in the last few days. So Isidor and Ballard, thank you very much. Mikey, who would be your next one?
I'm going to go for a striker as well, someone who's been in the Premier League for so long now. But is just continuing to age like a fine wine, and that's Danny Welbeck. We speak about like Henderson going to the World Cup. I wouldn't have thought that in 2025 there would actually be genuine conversations
Do you want
online. Not necessarily, but people are calling for it. Like in the last week, people have put Danny Welbeck's name forward as a potential backup.
It's not
to
deep
Harry
area,
Kane.
to be fair.
Not massively deep. Ollie Watkins, isn't quite at the level that he was, last year or the year before. Solanke's injured, and Liam Delap injured as well. I think a lot of us were expecting Liam Delap to be a shoo-in as Harry Kane's second choice, in the States, but we yet to see what his season's going to look like. And you speak about clinicalness. I mean, Danny Welbeck, just ridiculous this season. I think he had 3 shots in his first 5 appearances. In his last 3 appearances, he's had 8 shots and scored 5 of them, which is just, it's just incredible. And I wasn't expecting, I was expecting him to score against Man United. I wasn't expecting him to score a free kick.
And a very well perfected that little dinked finish.
Oh,
when he's
amazing.
through 1-on-1, it's just so nice.
Was that against Newcastle, wasn't it? Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And the range of finishes that he's shown in the last 3 games has been pretty amazing. And he's halfway to last season's personal best of 10. For context, before last season, his personal best was 9, and that was back in the David Moyes season at Man United, his last season at United. And then in the intervening years, his personal best was 6, which he got 3 times in a row for Brighton. He's just ridiculous. And he's not necessarily just running hot. Like, obviously, his finishing has been really efficient recently, but the quality of shots that he's taking has been genuinely great. I think he's averaging 0.3 XG per shot, that's better than Haaland is managing this season. Just super impressive. And also, on top of that, like Brighton have got a lot of depth at centre forward now. Of course, Evan Ferguson's left, but Jorginho Rutter has started 3 games at centre forward this season.
Big
obviously,
goal from Kustanas.
Yeah. But him and Seamas have, I think they've played 82 Premier League minutes between them this season, so they're not really getting a look in unless it's really late on in games. And Brighton were pretty, desperate towards the end of that Man United game, just throwing everything at them. Rutter, goal scoring isn't really his game. That's not what he's really used for in the centre-forward position, and I think he is more effective behind a striker. And Welbeck, his fitness levels, his physicality, his movement off the ball as well, it's as good as it's ever been. Like, he's just as good hanging off the last man and stretching the defence that way, or hanging back a little bit and waiting for that chance to arise on the edge of the box. He's been absolutely brilliant. I think he's fully deserving of being in contention of a spot at the World Cup next year if this form carries on. I think
he's got a good England record, by the way.
He's very good. 20 plus goals, I'm pretty sure.
I can't.
Maybe one of England's
I can barely remember it. Was his last appearance back in 2018 or something?
Yeah. Henderson and Welbeck back in the England squad. It's like 2012
all over again. Henderson's always been there.
This is true. Well done, Welbeck.
Yeah.
Well done, Welbeck. He's
Yeah.
also considerably younger than I always thought he was. I thought he was pushing 40, but he's
only 35
Yeah.
this year. Yeah,
I mean, but I
think he's
just thought he
nearly
was way
35.
older. Just because I remember him at Sunderland on loan, I think in around 2009-10. He's
Yeah.
just kept on going. Absolutely crazy. Okay, Joe.
I mean, yeah, him and Henderson were both in that Sunderland team, weren't they?
Absolutely. And
Nice.
Pickford would be a reunion of sorts. Joe.
I'm going for narratives. There's a lot of my picks.
Nice.
Obviously, I did the same with Jordan Henderson. I'm going to read out a quote right now from Karl-Heinz Rummenigge. I can only congratulate the people in Stuttgart for finding an idiot in Newcastle United who would pay that much money for Nick Woltemade. If ever a player has proved a man wrong quicker, I'd like to see it, because he has humiliated Rummenigge. Like, he has been so good at the start of this season. Obviously, we can talk about the goals. Yeah, I think it's 5 in all competitions, in it 4 in the Premier League, fine. But it's the style of play, the way he's linking the midfield and the attack, the flicks and the tricks around the corner. He's already a cult hero in Newcastle. I think he's bringing the best out of players like Bruno G, who are arriving late in the box. He had a good record last season. Really good record. And even in the Bundesliga, the goals were really impressive, weren't they? I think 17 Bundesliga goals. It's really good. Very impressive. He won the Pokal, scored in every single round other than the round he was ill in. So, he arrived with a high ceiling. But I think because of the fee and because of the narrative around Newcastle's summer transfer window, missing out on Sesko, missing out on a number of striker targets, losing Isak, it was kind of like, who's this guy? And how much have they paid? 75 million euros.
Also, not a conventional centre forward as well compared to the others.
Not a traditional centre forward. How young? He's won what? I think there was a lot of question marks amongst British fans, and certainly, in the words of Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, a lot of sort of question marks about the fee. And he's just proven that wrong for me. I think he's settled in so comfortably. The one thing you can say about Eddie Howe is he's going to make a striker look good. Isak looked exceptional last season in this Eddie Howe system, being fed balls, being allowed to run into the channels. He's turned it slightly on his head with how Woltemade's utilised in the number 9. Looks just as effective. We've seen him make Callum Wilson look like a superstar in the... Any number 9 that plays under Eddie Howe looks bloody good. And Woltemade is case in point yet again. I think he has probably set in his mind a target of 15 or so goals. I think he can certainly achieve that, both in the Premier League and in multi-competitions, because he looks just as effective in the Champions League. The finish against, was it Union Saint-Gilloise? The little Cruyff turn? Or was that in the Premier League? I can't
against
remember.
Brighton, he did the flick.
Brighton was the Cruyff turn, but the finish against Union Saint-Gilloise, kind of a little flick, little reactive flick, I thought was exceptional. He's just got a variety of finishes. His link-up play is amazing. Anybody who watched any of the Germany under-21 side in the Euros this summer will have seen a really technically skilled player. Back to goal, first touch, absolute top tier. And to do that 6'6" with that hair in that environment at St James's Park, you're going to be a hero.
He also took one of those one of the most remarkable penalties I've seen earlier this season as well.
Yeah, one of the best penalties ever.
Hits the valve and it goes top left, and it's like a Ronaldo free kick.
One of the best penalties ever. And I think, we talk about stats a lot on this show, don't we? And non-penalty expected goals. He's putting up a better non-penalty expected goal rate than Igor Ekitike this season.
Yeah. It's very impressive.
And we're talking about Igor Ekitike as being the breakout star, the guy, the signing of the summer, which he obviously is. But Big Nick, come on.
Do you think Woltemade should have been Newcastle's first choice in hindsight now? Do you think, if Ekitike had gone to Newcastle or Sesko had gone to Newcastle, they would have impressed so much?
I think Sesko or if Ekitike had been at Newcastle right now, we would still be talking about him being one of the best young strikers we've seen come to this league. He's that good. And Eddie Howe is... I just think we could have put you up front. In this Eddie Howe system, you'd have scored 10 goals. Honestly, the guy is Nostradamus of nines. He just knows how to get nines scoring goals.
Did it with Josh King as well.
Even go back to that Bournemouth side. Look at the number 9 rate, the goal scoring in the Premier League. Early days at Newcastle, the number 9 rate for players like Alexander Isak, for Callum Wilson. If you're a number 9, chances are coming your way in this Eddie Howe.
Didn't quite do it with Chris Wood though, did he? That's his one. That's his one failure.
You also had a unique position in that you were, I think, one of the first people to interview him in this country as well, Joe. What was he like as a character? Did you think confident
huge personality, massive voice in the room. When he walked in, you felt it. I think he doesn't feel his age. He's still very young, but he feels like he's a very experienced footballer. Really good talker, and he's spoken about, setting targets for himself. And one of the reasons he joined Newcastle was because he wanted to work with Eddie Howe specifically. Is playing off handsomely, right? I think it would have been easy to be Nick Woltemade, join a club like Bayern Munich, maybe be swallowed up a little bit behind Harry Kane, like we see Nicholas Jackson do. The minutes aren't really there, whereas he's taken a risk. He's gone to a club like Newcastle, who are flying in terms of the style of play, but maybe not the most glamorous in the European sense, right? There's not loads of attraction there. You see them linked with huge names, whereas Woltemade has gone there taking a risk, and I think it's going to pay off big time because I think Eddie Howe is one of the best coaches in Europe.
I struggle to disagree with it, and yeah, as much as it pains me as a Sunderland fan, love the player for sure. Right, I'm going to cover the next two quite quickly because we've already touched on Brentford quite extensively. Shout out Mikey as well for giving them a real fighting chance of survival where very few did in the summer. You said, don't underestimate Keith Andrews.
Yeah, I must admit, I said that as well after seeing them in a pre-season friendly where they were struggling, and actually Jordan Henderson came off the bench and they just looked transformed as a team with him on the field. So I do, and like that was with, you know, Thiago, who started the season on fire, playing and looking a bit lost in the first half and then coming into his own as it went on. Like, I didn't think that the Henderson signing was going to be that pivotal, but it feels like it's that pivotal, that it's the difference between Brentford being mid-table, fairly safe, and relegation battle. And they may well get brought into a relegation battle at some point this season. But that leadership on the field, and actually, that directness, that ability to just first time ping a ball into the forward line has been massive.
Speaking of that directness, the player that I wanted to talk about was Igor Thiago, who, it's easy to forget that he was signed in 2024 as that Ivan Toney replacement, knee injury in pre-season, misses 37 games. I think he plays around 300 minutes across the entirety of last season. And then at the start of this season, 6 goals in 9 games. Big goals too. Ripped apart Man United. Goal against Liverpool as well. There was huge goals in other games. And it feels like this is a player that's really taking his opportunity. And if you look at shots on target, XG, he's right up there this season with Haaland, Mateta and Semenyo in pretty much every category. He has been remarkable, and massive credit to come back from a knee injury into a side that has lost so much forward talent in the last 2 seasons and step up. I think it's been absolutely remarkable from him as well. And it's because of his efficiency. He's getting 50% of his shots on target. There's only 2 players in the Premier League that are taking more shots and getting a higher percentage on target, and that's Semenyo and Haaland. And if you carry on doing that, these numbers are replicable for sure. Unlike someone like Wilson Isidor, who's getting very few chances, Igor Thiago, I think it can continue as the season progresses. Michael Kayode as well. I think he's being earmarked obviously for those amazing long throws, but I think his all-round game has been really impressive this year as well. I think he's first for crosses at Brentford, first for defensive action, second for passes into the box. A really nicely well-rounded fullback. And given the fact he only signed from Fiorentina on loan in January, they made that move permanent. And again, it's a transfer that's really paying off about 6 months down the line, as clubs like Brighton and Brentford seem to do. They're always signing with about 18 months in advance, and it does feel like Kayode is also profiting from that policy.
Another player I think is profiting from that policy is Yarmouk in midfield. He's playing alongside Henderson in this pivot. He's only 21, Yarmouk. Yeah. It's outrageous. He's absolutely a player to watch across this season for his development. I watched him against West Ham a couple of weeks ago. He tore West Ham's midfield to shreds. Ability to get box to box. He's an amazing reader of the game as well. I think in terms of possession adjusted interceptions, he's second in Europe for all under 21 midfielders. He's seriously highly talented, and no doubt playing alongside Henderson. Another Henderson factor here. Yeah. I think he's having a big payoff for him. I really think it's improved his game.
Absolutely. Right, Mikey.
Yeah, I've got one final one from me. Going to Man City, because I feel like the narrative around City being a one-man team with Haaland recently has got a little bit out of hand. Early weeks of the season, we were talking about all sorts of players in that City team who are stepping up, in particular Gianni Reinders, who of course has been maybe a little bit quiet, or at least his influence in the final third has been a bit quieter in recent weeks. But I think Jeremy Doku is a player who isn't getting spoken about enough, and especially compared to last season, which was of course a big down season for Man City. And Jeremy Doku, I think, almost became a bit of a poster boy for that downfall, because as exciting as he was in the final third, his end product wasn't quite there, his overall output wasn't quite there. And I felt for City, him and Savinho last season. I mean, Savinho was probably getting more props for his all-round play. Doku, I think, needed to step up more. But then also, Doku, before he arrived at City, wasn't necessarily known for his end product. He was very much, he was one of the top dribblers in Europe when he was at Rennes. And yet most people were kind of understanding that he wasn't getting a move to a big club because his end product wasn't quite there at the time. And then he gets thrust into City, and Leroy Sané's played for this club in recent years. Raheem Sterling, Riyad Mahrez, they've all put up world-class attacking numbers at this club under Pep Guardiola. and now you're coming in and you probably don't have as much top-level experience as any of those players did when they came into Man City, and now you're being required to, put up those kinds of numbers. So I do feel for Doku in that sense, but this year it feels like he's turned a corner. It feels like he's taken his game to another level, especially in terms of his creative output. 3 assists already. His expected assists per 90 is the best in the Premier League. It's, I think, 5th best in Europe. His shots have completely dropped off a cliff, weirdly. Like, he's not really a goal-first winger anymore. He was taking over 3 in 23-24. That's now come to under 1 in the Premier League. He's still putting up quite a few in the Champions League. Of course, scored that amazing goal against Napoli.
Do you think he could score more goals though? I think you mentioned earlier about Haaland being the one-man team narrative. I think that is a fair sort of claim about the Man City goal scoring output. Yeah. Nobody in the squad has scored more than 1 goal this season in the league. Doku hasn't scored a goal.
Own goals is their second top score. Yeah.
Do you think he needs to start scoring more goals?
Potentially, but I think a number of players in that City team can score more goals. Foden, Reinders, they've got a lot of players who are capable of scoring goals. And I think Doku's...
But we've seen Foden score those goals. We've seen Reinders score those goals in the season.
Yeah.
We haven't yet seen...
But Doku's been providing those chances, though, for those players. I think that's more where I'm getting at. And, of course, he can add more goals to his game. Last season and the season before, he was a bit more well-rounded in that sense. But I think... the flip side of that was last season he was skinning right backs 10 times a game, and then no chances were coming at the end of that. And it was partly, I think, because he was crossing from out wide up like too much. This season we're seeing him actually get into the box before laying on those chances a lot more.
He looks so much more dangerous centrally as well.
Yeah, way more. Like, we saw against Man United, he was picking up the ball way more centrally. He's skinning Luke Shaw, and then suddenly he's in a position where he's like really close to the goal and he can produce a really easy cutback. Like, that is where I think his game has come to a new level, and I think you credit Guardiola for the way that he set up this team to suit him more in that respect. But yeah, when you look at his touch map, he's picking up a lot more centrally, and he's breaking into the box in far more advantageous positions. And now he's creating nearly 2 chances a game. I think before this season he never averaged even a chance a game. So yeah, I do agree with you, Joe. I think to be a prime Man City under Guardiola winger, you need to have both goals and assists to your game, 100%. But I think, given where City are at the moment, for Doku to be showing the best creative form, really, of his career, I think is a massive positive. And I think as this City team develops over the season, I expect the goals will come as well.
Okay, fair enough. I've got 2 quick shout-outs to finish. First one, Martin Dubravka. I think it's no easy feat coming in to replace James Trafford.
Weekend.
Yeah, remarkable. And you're coming in to replace a goalkeeper that put up one of the best championship seasons ever in terms of goalkeepers, I think it's fair to say. You haven't played... he played a fair amount for Newcastle, actually, in the previous 2 seasons because Nick Pope picked up a lot of injuries, but he'd never really been number 1 for a club across an entire season. I think he's been really, really solid for Burnley. There's a couple of players in there as well. I think Walker's gone under the radar. Hartman at left back, I think, has been very good as well. And it feels like, despite not necessarily having a particularly star striker, let's say, they're getting goals still. Foster is, Fleming's now started scoring as well. So well done, Burnley, look a lot more competitive. Also Marcos Senesi as well. People forget that actually before Howson broke into the side last year, he was playing so well for Bournemouth. And has done ever since he's arrived. But Howson just went to a new level with that partnership with Zabarnyi. He was benched for an entire year and people were panicking when they lost all these defenders, and obviously Kepa in the summer as well. Senesi has been brilliant at the start of this season. There are only 14 players that have completed more passes into the box this season in the entire Premier League. Only Van Dijk has cleared the ball more often, and only Moises Caicedo has made more interceptions. Incredible. So if you're doing a team of the season so far, I think there's an argument that Senesi's probably in there so far. Amazing stuff.
That's a claim.
That is a claim. That is a claim.
Gabriel and Saliba.
I actually think he might be in over Saliba. I think Gabriel has been top, but yeah, I'm putting him alongside Gabriel. Right, Joe. Any other final shouts?
Quick shout out to Emi Buendia. I think it's such a shame to see him come off injured at the weekend. Fingers crossed for him. It's not serious, so it didn't look great, did it? Because it was kind of off the ball and he comes off and he can't walk and he's already in the boot. But he has just been remarkable in this sort of last 5 or 6 week period where you've seen Aston Villa re-find all sorts of form, 6 wins in 7. The loss against Go Ahead Eagles as one of those ones, wasn't it, where the away side in Europe in a European game and the home side just suddenly get a couple of goals out of nothing, and it's all chaos atmosphere. But I thought Buendia, week on week, the goal against Spurs, stinking with his weak foot, just absolutely
the ball from
remarkable
Matty Cash
finish.
as well.
Yeah,
Matty Cash has had a really good start as well.
But Buendia, I think, didn't necessarily have a home in this team at Aston Villa for a large period of this Unai Emery tenure. But the way players have been moved out the door, the way the squad has now been set up, it feels like there's a real opportunity for him here to play alongside Morgan Rogers in those advanced roles, to make big impacts in games. He's so dynamic in tight spaces. Like, there was a moment at the weekend where he had 2 or 3 players around him, a couple of touches, burst out, and suddenly Villa are in on goal, and you think, wow, like, this is the Emi Buendia we saw at Norwich, which hasn't necessarily been the case for a long time, because the numbers when he came out with Norwich were insane. So fingers crossed he's not injured.
Yeah, I think it says a lot that Harvey Elliott can't get into this Villa team.
Yeah.
About Buendia's performances.
Big time.
Yeah.
Harvey Elliott, Jadon Sancho. Yeah, it's all about Emi Buendia at Villa at the moment. Guys, thank you so much for watching the Lowdown for another week. Those were the players that are proving you wrong so far this season. Let us know whether you agreed with our suggestions. Let us know where we went wrong as well in the comments. I imagine there'll be a few Arsenal fans complaining about my inclusion for Senesi in team of the season so far. Come on, bring it on. Thanks so much for watching the Lowdown for this week, guys. We'll catch you next week. Bye-bye.